Our guest today is Rafaela Medeiros. She's a sociologist and a researcher at the Laboratory of Studies of Politics, Election and Media at UFC University at Fortaleza, Brazil. She's a holder of a PhD in business from Fundação Getúlio Vargas Business School in Brazil, and she's a unique person who can link together computational background and the background in humanities, which is a very interesting intersection for us to learn from. Our topic today is philosophy of science. It is something what we often study just for the exam, just for the sake of passing it. But there's more depth in the subject, and there's more views that Rafaela can expose to us. So, could you please tell about your background and your view in philosophy and philosophy of science?
Yes, well, thank you so much for your invitation, Evgeny. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about it. What to me, it's actually one of the foundations of empirical knowledge and my own research. So after a bachelor in social sciences and my master in sociology, I wanted to extend my background in quantitative methods, and I was also interested in jumping into applied social sciences. So I went into a business school in Rio and learn more about causal inference and R, Python, and all that, because that's what I wanted. One of the reasons why I study elections is that it's one of the most visible and quantifiable parts of social interactions. So I was really interested in the methods.
So it's easy to answer a question of what you are doing, so people would easily identify what's the result of the research, right?
Yes, it's easy to show the results. Sometimes it's not easy to run the analysis, but that's okay. So I believe that experimentation, testing, and objectivity are paramount for social sciences, and that there are distinct ways to achieve this and apply those concepts, with a range of methods. We have now the opportunity to use very large sets of data, be it text, be it, neural processing language and all that. So there are different ways to combine those tracks, which I find very interesting and they're very exciting to me.
Great. I keep on remembering a quote. I think that's Niels Bohr, a physicist, who said, the best thing you have in practice is a good theory. So my next question is philosophy of science important today?
Yes and no.
Okay. Should we start with the no part?
Sure. In a way, we all have inbuilt theories, right, in our minds, and we're trained in certain areas, and there's a lot we can do. What knowledge is possible, what science is possible. We were to connect with each other and to, our brains have very good structures to mimic each other and to follow through that, to problem solve. We have survived for millennia without philosophy of science.
There should be a yes part to the question, I assume.
Yeah, that's the no part. There's a lot we can do with the tools we have inbuilt in our hardware and our software in terms of society and individuals, in my belief at least. However, and this is the yes part, the benefits of having a unique interpretation and a solid background in the philosophy of science can pay a lot in the long term. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because it exposes you to a very long literature, and it kind of forces you, because everyone is talking in their own language and it's talking, from a different perspective, it kind of forces you to find out where your perspective is, what your core values are, and what are the paradigms that you want to use to actually judge other people's research, and the world itself, all the information that we are receiving all the time. So, for instance, when Yngve Slyngstad, former Norway's sovereign fund administrator, assumed as...
and here comes the economics and finance example. Yeah, good. Yeah, we're just to intervene where economics, finance, and business IT example, so students pay attention. An example in economics field.
Exactly.
Please, Rafa.
In a very practical example, right?
Okay,
because this is from one of the most successful administrations of one of the most successful pension funds in the world, which is Norway's pension fund, right? When he first assumed, his first hire for the fund's department was a moral philosopher. And the task of his new employee was to work out from first principles how to make the fund's growing heft, which stocks to pick with a long-term vision, which to stay out. So whenever you are in a position where evaluation and decision-making are crucial, philosophy gives you a strong foundation to build up your critical thinking muscle.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point that we often see a philosophy as something like that pile of books is falling on you and it buries you down. But you can also see a philosophy as a foundation that you build upon and allows you better critical choice, better decisions. And I think that's a very important point, that it's not something that's constraining you, but something that's enabling you to think in a better way, in a more structured way, and builds more confidence in your decisions and consequently in your actions. And I think that's a very important angle for us. So, where something you wanted to add on it? Yes.
Of course. Just to wrap it up, I mean, as I was saying, we're mammals, we're humans, but we're very bad with three things: consistency, detachment from our emotions, and predicting for the long term. Right? Our brains don't work with probabilities very well. There's a lot of research on that. I like the part of cognitive behavioral research. And there's a lot of information coming from that field. So philosophy helps us, because if you're working with, as you mentioned, foundational grounding in principles, when to detach from your emotions, when to follow your intuitions, and how to keep those decisions consistent, and how to develop that long-term critical view of things.
We're in university, and there's often, if you are in a university program, you would meet a course in philosophy in some variation of it, either undergraduate, then the graduate. You might like it, not like it. In your view, what's a typical composition of a course of philosophy of science should be? What's the minimal set of literature, authors to read, and more importantly, what's changing in those courses? Are they changing at all, and what direction do these courses evolve to?
Okay, I'm gonna start from the end, answering your question, how they are changing. I think there's a major change in how this knowledge is being applied and to different areas, because every area has a very specific set of problems, and those problems need to be addressed in a very tailored way. So I would say that this is the way it's changing. However, the foundations, at least in my interpretation and in my learning of it, they're very stable, and they circle around 4 authors. Immanuel Kant.
What are they for authors?
Yes. Immanuel Kant, David Hume, Karl Popper, and Thomas Kuhn. Those four, they are like the keystone, I would say. The last two, they're paramount to understand the contemporary debate on this issue.
Can we start with Hume? So why is Hume important?
Yeah. Okay, so Hume is important because he questioned the idea that, reason was a tool to reach universal truths or to reach abstract rules for the world, and that you could actually leverage just on rationality and lock yourself into your room and get with a pile of books and get to understand the universe. Basically, he said that's not true. Which was shocking, because we're talking about a time in which, coming from Greek philosophy and Enlightenment, Descartes, the idea of I think, therefore I am, and all that attention that was given to that rational part of the philosophical debate was kind of challenged when he said those very powerful statements. And he said in a very logical way. He used the same authors, very similar examples. So that kind of throw a tantrum, sort of, in the debate of his time. So that's why he's important, because he was not the only one to challenge his idea. Other people before him have already done this, John Locke, George Berkeley, but he was the more condensed and the denser one, I would say. So that's why he's so important. He kind of established empiricism, as we name it. We can go a little bit more into detail on this or not?
Yeah, let's try to make a step to the next person. So, what is happening next?
Yeah. So Kant, what Immanuel Kant did was what sometimes is referred to as a Copernican revolution in that discussion.
Is that the part where the saying of green spectacles comes in place? So your empirical knowledge can be biased if you wear a specific filtered glass in your spectacles.
Yeah, so that's when Kant comes in and says, you know what, this debate between if there is an ultimate true and an a priori knowledge, or if there isn't, the rationalist and the empiricist, it doesn't really make sense. It's a superficial debate, because there are things in the mind of the subject that are transcendental. And those categories like time, space, he called the green spectacles. And if we are all using green spectacles, everything is green, and we didn't even know that other colors existed. So this is more or less the why it's important.
This is the point that can be related to the start of the 20th century, and one could have a feeling that the time was running much faster onwards. The 20th century brought us 2 world wars, a lot of technological progress, and actually a lot of devastation. So how would a lot of progress, a lot of good things, a lot of bad things. So do you see any effects of this on philosophy of science, and what was the response of philosophy of science in the 20th century?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the debate between Hume and the rationalists culminated with Kant's, so to speak, middle term solution, summary solution. And that was more or less the established idea that we gain to understand the 20th century. The problem is it helped us explain why science went wrong a lot of the times because, you know, we're not dissociated from the empirical world and the relationships between of power, politics, and all that. We're embedded into that. And the knowledge that we produce sometimes is also afflicted by the biases we have. In a way, this is a modern interpretation of what we wrote. In a way that inspired writers like Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn to develop further those ideas that were kind of mixed between Kant and Hume and other authors, and all that debate that was a legacy from philosophy of science in the 28th and then the 19th century, to help us understand what was going on, you know, because we had, in a very short time span, just 2 world wars, very, very tragic, very fatal, and at the same time that we are reaping out the benefits of the Industrial Revolution and all the technological progress, as you've mentioned, how they impact us, and then what we can do to diminish their influence in our work and increase our objectivity.
So it looks like the science, the philosophy of science in 20th century is much more socialized. It's closer to society than it was before in pure reasoning, and I think that's something to mark. So Kuhn and Popper are central figures for philosophy of science in the 20th century, and what conclusions can we draw from them today? So what would be a good synopsis of their position, and are they relevant today?
Okay, so Kuhn believes that science is developed through paradigms. And what does that mean? It means that in a given age, people from a certain field agree about what are the relevant problems, what are the relevant questions to ask, how to measure them, how to answer them in a certain way. So, and all that constitutes a paradigm. You go to school and you learn the current paradigm in your field, and you're trained in those methods, and you're trained to identify the vocabulary and listen to those questions, and etc.
Would a framework would be a good computer term for paradigm? So a paradigm is a framework, right?
Yes, it's a software, I would say. Even further, it's a software. You know, it only sees what it's programmed to see, and only sees it in a particular way. We're humans; our minds are a little bit more complex, so we have that advantage yet.
Yeah, but it's also advantageous to stick to sort of set of concepts. So. It allows you to simplify. It allows you to work quicker on decision. If that concept works, is tested to work by your peers, it's a good thing to stick to a paradigm, to a framework, right?
Yes, it is. If you are convinced that they are true, and if you're not seeking to be an innovator, which was what Popper was trying to inspire in his students. So we have the contrary perspective in terms of philosophy of science coming from Popper. Kuhn, just to mention historically, Kuhn wrote this after Popper, right? Popper was writing first. They are contemporaries, though. So Kuhn studied the scientific revolutions. How did they happen in physics and chemistry throughout the centuries? And he came up with this idea that there are paradigms, but there are also times of revolution. It's good to be within the same framework of your field, as you've mentioned, in times of normal science, but in times of revolution, sometimes it's better to be sided with the new guys.
Think of academic placements and tenures.
Yeah, you can think of that, but we can also think in the long term of science, right? So it was better to be sided with Newton or Copernicus than not, because we remember them, we know who they are today. So, but it depends what you value, I guess. A rational actor would probably just focus on the paradigm. However, Popper has this very interesting writing about the logic of scientific um, enterprise. I don't remember what the translation specific is.
Yeah, we can add that link to the video. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. So yeah, and what he mentions is, we are actually working to falsify theories. And that is a very interesting concept. If you are a real scientist looking to be objective and looking to, do a good scientific research, you're looking for loopholes in your own theory and in other people's theories. That makes more science more quickly revolutionary, I would say. It makes more paradigms more unstable, but it also makes the knowledge production more diverse and probably more interesting, more fun. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like your theory is more flexible if it's falsifiable. So you're kind of suggesting your theory for a test by saying it's falsifiable. You might, as a bearer of knowledge, as a guardian of knowledge, say it's etched in stone because it's like God-given, or it's given from pure reason or from some other. But if you're on that ground, you're kind of halting, you're stopping any dialogue. So there's few things I remember from philosophy of science course, but falsifiability kind of was very appealing concept to me, and I think that it's testability. It's testability and suggestion for further development. That looks the interpretation, the contribution.
Yeah,
So,
and I think so.
yeah?
I think it's absolutely right.
Good. So, what does the Kuhn-Popper comparison have? What implication does it have to the science debate?
That's a very interesting question, I guess. It has a lot of ramifications in terms of knowledge production. People are still debating what is the philosophy of science today, what paradigms are there. So, and those authors established different traditions from where to look at. So that's important. That's one field within the field. I would say implication. But a more broad perspective is what you've mentioned about, the transformations in the 20th century and a little bit what we touted earlier. Because the problems brought by technology progress, science progress, and war became a little bit worse in World War II, right? We had scientific theories built to justify certain totalitarian systems and certain systems of government and things like this. So yeah, that kind of shocked the world, And I think that one important lesson was to see how dangerous that connection can be, and how dangerous the idea that there is an unifying truth, that there is a unique truth can be. That really gives us a hard lesson as human beings on not to go that way, I guess. And so I think that it's important to note that with all their divergences, they agree with this point. Science is inherently diverse, and this is a good thing. This is a positive thing because it creates, as you've mentioned, it creates more testability, it creates further knowledge, it advances things, and this gives us a multiple pathway to search for our own careers and search for our own understanding and search for our own principles on how to live life and be good professionals and contribute to society. So I think that this is very, very interesting. To me, this is an implication of their discussion about that.
Yeah, that's a very positive view of science, because having grown in very centralized system, we tend to view science as a very centralized institution, and some new things as side effects, some things that would have to go back into central system. And we know the centralized systems, they do fail. So the diversity is not window dressing for science. It's a vital part. And we often see the movements are still kind of go different directions. I think we would have to chance to speak more specifically about corporatization of science, about clustering of academic publishing, of schools of thought, which you can see as a peer network, but also as a move to centralize this and appropriate knowledge. Yes, and thanks for this view of diversified science that can emerge in different countries, in different contexts, and still be valid. So I think it's a good result of reviewing the Kuhn-Popper debate. I would like to move. Anything you would add on that, or should we move on?
No, I think it was a perfect wrap up, and I'm learning a lot from you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. And as any researcher with the background of your level, you have the capability to judge on reading and on your reading list of books, and make sort of your own path in a mind map of standard and additional literature that you encounter. So my question is about your current state of your mind map for philosophy of science, and just some books that you like and you might advise our students to touch upon. Maybe not read fully, but kind of at least touch upon and try look at. So what are these books and resources?
What I have found more helpful to me was to look at the world as a combination of individuals. So that philosophical and methodological tradition we call methodological individualism in the social sciences, it captured my attention from the beginning for some reason. Mm-hmm. I just was drawn into it like a fly. As Kuhn says, as a matter of conviction in the end of the day, and I'm convinced that we are agents in our world, and we do what we do for our own purposes, and even though if they are anchored in beliefs that we don't know exactly what are, but we can find out.
I think that should resonate. That should resonate a lot with the generational change, the generation of Y, Z, and being very individual, being very conscious about own views, own beliefs, and the appreciation of those beliefs. So it's quite interesting that even in the methodology part, there's a space and there's a trend of the philosophy of methodological individualism that fits those aspirations. So that's a good that's good news for young researchers. That's good news for young people, right?
Yeah, but it's very old. I mean, we have Max Weber in the beginning of the 20th century, and then Raymond Boudon. John Elster is a contemporary author that I really find interesting. So yeah, and I've also was mobbed by someone from probably your field that you and your students know much better than I do, which is Thomas Schilling, micromotives and microbehavior. Yeah, because they show that sometimes the things that we observe at a large scale are just an ecological fallacy. They're not really connected to what we see in a micro perspective, and I think that this is really interesting. So more recently, I've also, I kind of shift a little bit within that field to incorporate the idea of emotions. One author that I really like is Hannah Arendt. The way that she does this and her application on her understanding of society and politics and things like this. And more specifically, her last book, the last book she wrote while she was alive, which is called The Life of the Mind.
Actually, unfinished, right? So Life of the Mind is unfinished, correct?
2 volumes.
Two out of...
Yeah, the mind and the perception are finished. The part that she didn't finish was the part of on judgment. She considered that we have 3 faculties: mind, perception, and judgment. So the volume on judgment was unfinished. The book was published, though, from lectures from previous classes she wrote, and they kind of put them together and yeah. But it's a marvelous book. It's very inspirational for me because she incorporates in her theory, in her philosophy of science, the idea of action, the role of emotions. And I think that this is paramount to understand what we do and how we do it, especially today, like I've mentioned, with all the literature we have on cognitive biases and how emotions kind of, overwhelm us, but also gives us great insight about the world and who we are. I think this is a part that was missing in my readings, and I'm grateful that I have found that.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor to wrap our small presentation of philosophy of science. That it's a journey that takes you somewhere. It's not holding you back, and it's useful. It's useful in your positioning yourself as a professional, as a human, as a citizen. As a person caring for what's happening in the world around you. So I think it's a great perspective, and thanks a lot for bringing it to us, Rafa. And any small advice to our students that you could send from Brazil in this challenging times? It could be philosophy of science or something you say to your students. Is there any? Is there any good advice from you?
I would say that be suspicious of yourself if you can, but also of, very rigid lines of thought. Because in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as much, in my perspective at least, which school of thought you choose in terms of your values, your core values, your philosophy. What is more valuable to me is that, you as a student, as an undergrad, or my students in social sciences can develop their own philosophical roadmap and a personalized guide of principles that can sharpen the inner compass that they already have. We already have this. We already judge things. This is one of the fundamental capacities we have. So this quality of reading and interpreting philosophers can be a way to start that. But there might be also other ways available to you. So if this is not exactly your thing, there might be other ways to develop it. And, just try to challenge yourself to do so and try to understand which is the core of your inner compass. Where is it pointing each moment in a moment-to-moment basis? Because if you don't know where it's going, someone will.
That's a great advice to follow, and I hope our interview gives a little bit of more resource for students to find their inner compass, inner self, and believing in yourself. So my addition to that is to the students to believe in yourself, and that you could progress in any field, in sociology, in economics, finance, in IT, in computer science, that you can excel. So thanks a lot for bringing this perspective. I hope we have a chance for for a more specific part on information technology as a follow-up. But for now, I'm wrapping up, and thanks again, Rafaela, for this bright review and sharing your thoughts and opinion. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Evgeny, and I hope to see you again anytime soon.